This is the science behind how your dog knows when someone can't be trusted, and it has nothing to do with a sixth sense. For over 30,000 years, dogs have lived alongside humans. That is not just a long time. That is long enough for evolution to reshape an entire species' brain around reading us. And the result is an animal so finely tuned to human behavior, human chemistry, and human emotion that it can detect things about the people around you that you will never consciously notice. Let's start with the nose, because that is where most of this story begins. You have roughly 6 million olfactory receptors in your nasal cavity. Your dog has up to 300 million, and the part of a dog's brain devoted to processing smell is proportionally 40 times larger than yours. This means their sense of smell is somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 times more acute than a human's. In certain specialized breeds, some researchers believe it could be up to 10 million times more sensitive. But here's where it gets really interesting. Dogs don't just smell what you had for lunch, they smell what is happening inside your body. When you are stressed, afraid, or angry, your body releases specific chemicals. Cortisol, adrenaline. These compounds seep out through your breath and your sweat, and your dog picks up on them instantly. A 2022 study published in PLOS One confirmed that dogs can detect an odor associated with acute stress from human breath and sweat alone, with no visual or vocal cues present. Just chemistry. And dogs don't just detect this stress, they react to it emotionally. In 2018, Professor Biagio Daniello and his team at the University of Naples, Federico II, ran a fascinating experiment. They collected sweat samples from volunteers who had watched either The Shining or The Jungle Book, films specifically chosen to trigger fear and happiness. Then they placed those sweat samples in a room with a dog, the dog's owner, and a stranger. The dogs exposed to fear-related odors showed elevated heart rates, more signs of stress, sought more reassurance from their owners, and were notably less friendly with the stranger in the room. Dogs exposed to happy sweat were more sociable and more willing to approach the stranger. As Daniello told New Scientist, the role of the olfactory system has been largely underestimated, maybe because our own species is more focused on the visual system. And there is actually a second olfactory system most people do not know about. Dogs possess what is called a vomeronasal organ, located inside the nasal cavity near the roof of the mouth, with direct neural connections to the brain. This organ is designed specifically to analyze chemical signals called chemosignals, subtle compounds related to emotions, reproductive status, social cues, and potential threats. It is essentially a dedicated threat assessment tool built right into their anatomy. But smell is only part of the picture. Dogs are also remarkably skilled at reading human body language and facial expressions. Research has shown that dogs are actually better at interpreting human communicative cues like pointing gestures and gaze direction than chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. They can distinguish a smiling face from an angry face, even in photographs. And they show a subtle right hemisphere bias when processing emotional cues, tending to look toward the left side of a human's face when assessing expressions. This is the same pattern seen in humans and other primates. Your dog is literally reading your face the way you read other people's faces. Their brains are wired for this. Brain imaging studies have revealed that dogs possess voice processing regions in their temporal cortex that activate specifically in response to vocal sounds. Emotionally charged sounds, like laughter, crying, or an angry shout, activate both a dog's auditory cortex and its amygdala, the brain region responsible for processing emotions. They are not just hearing your tone, they are feeling it. Now, here's where it all comes together. In 2015, researcher Akiko Takaoka at Kyoto University published a landmark study in the journal Animal Cognition that demonstrated something remarkable. Dogs can identify liars, and once they do, they stop trusting them. The experiment was elegant. A person would point to a container that had food hidden inside it. The dog would follow the direction and find the food. Then the same person would point to an empty container, deceiving the dog. The third time that person pointed, even when the food was actually there, the dogs refused to follow the direction. 34 dogs participated. Every single one stopped trusting the deceiver by the third round. After being lied to just once, only 8% of dogs followed that person's guidance again. Takaoka herself was surprised. She said, "Dogs have more sophisticated social intelligence than we thought. This social intelligence evolved selectively in their long life history with humans." That same year, another Kyoto University study, led by Professor Kazuo Fujita, showed that dogs also evaluate people based on how they treat others. In the experiment, dogs watched their owners ask a stranger for help. When the stranger refused to help, the dogs reliably avoided taking food from that person afterward, choosing instead to accept treats from a neutral bystander. They weren't just remembering who was nice to them. They were watching how people behaved toward their owner and making judgments accordingly. There's also the oxytocin connection. A 2015 study led by Miho Nagasawa and published in Science found that when dogs and their owners gaze into each other's eyes, both experience a surge in oxytocin, the so-called love hormone associated with bonding and trust. This creates what researchers described as an interspecies oxytocin-mediated positive loop, a biochemical feedback cycle that deepens the bond between dog and human. Wolves raised by humans don't trigger this response. It appears to be something that emerged specifically through domestication. Now, it's important to be honest about the limits of what we know. Science doesn't always tell a clean story, and this field is no exception. In July 2025, a new study from Kyoto University, led by Hoi Lam Jim, tested 40 pet dogs to see whether they would prefer a generous stranger over a selfish one. The results? Dogs across all age groups showed no consistent preference. They did not reliably favor the person who fed them over the person who refused. Jim noted, "It's clear that reputation formation may be more complex than previously thought, even for animals like dogs that closely cooperate with humans." The researchers pointed to several possible explanations. Pet dogs regularly encounter friendly strangers, which might reduce their vigilance. The dogs were not hungry during the test. The outdoor setting introduced distractions. The sample size was small. This does not erase the earlier findings, but it does remind us that what dogs can do in controlled conditions and what they consistently do in everyday life may not always align. So what's the honest answer? Can your dog recognize a bad person? Here is what the science actually supports. Your dog can smell the chemical signatures of stress, fear, and aggression on a person's body. It can read facial expressions, interpret tone of voice, and observe how people treat others. It can learn, often after a single experience, whether a specific person is reliable or deceptive. And it responds emotionally to all of this, becoming more anxious around stressed or fearful people and more sociable around happy ones. Your dog isn't psychic. It isn't reading minds. But it is running a remarkably sophisticated threat assessment using sensory tools and social intelligence that took tens of thousands of years to develop. 300 million scent receptors, 40 times more brain power devoted to smell. Voice processing regions tuned to human emotion. An oxytocin bond that literally mirrors the one between a parent and child. So the next time your dog growls at someone you just met, or refuses to approach a stranger who seems perfectly friendly, pay attention. Your dog might not know the word for untrustworthy, but it doesn't need one.